Well, good morning. Good. It is great to see you here this morning and welcome you here to Stones Hill Community Church. It's always a joy. I'm Joey, and it's my privilege to talk to you out of the Bible this morning. We've been in a series called The Spiritual Dark Ages, A Hero Must Rise. And boy, if that's ever been true, it is true today. We are talking about a series of cycles that have been presented to us and for us in the book of Judges. And the various judges we've looked at, been different types of judges, different types of stories related to their lives. And so today we are looking at the seventh cycle of a seven-cycle process. The judge we're going to look at today, we'll begin looking at here this day. The next week we will do a two-part series on the life of Samson. You've heard about this guy. This guy was challenged in a lot of different ways. He was challenged in terms of his priorities. He was challenged in terms of his dedication to God. He was challenged in terms of his relationship. And the people in his story were relationally challenged in many ways. And so I thought what we would do here this morning is to kind of contemporize some of the issues that we'll be looking at, some of the details that we'll be looking at in the book of Judges. And we would contemporize that some by having someone come and just offer to you by way of introduction this morning to what we're going to be looking at the next couple of weeks. Have someone to offer to you an ode to the relationally challenged. And if you would, please make welcome Miss Kara Fields.
I am a relationally challenged idiot, so stay away from me. I mean, come here. Whoa. That's a little too close. I got my personal space, you know. There's a bubble, plenty enough room in this world for all of us to just take it down a notch. Hey, where you been lately? Are you avoiding me? Are you mad at me? Oh, is this about what I said at Starbucks? Me and my stupid mouth. No, you know what? It's not my problem how you interpret every word I say. So why does there have to be so much drama? I miss you. We need to hang out soon, so call me. Wait, this week's kind of crazy. I'll call you Tuesday or by the end of the week at the latest. What? Why are you looking at me like that? Why are you so clingy? What do you think I am, your cat? Do you have any hobbies? Golf? Scrapbooking? Fly fishing? You know, I heard there's a great place up in Michigan. Maybe you should go for a few days. I'll lend you the money. My money is your money. My time is your time. My life is yours. My soul is yours. Without you, I am nothing. That's what friends are for. What? You need how much? I mean, we haven't known each other that long. I think maybe we should take a break for a while. I need a little me time. Some time to explore who I really am. No, nothing personal. It's just I need some time to be alone. I'm so lonely. I don't have any real friends. I mean, yeah, I got like 900 friends on Facebook, but no one I can just call up. Hey, why are you acting so distant? Where are you going? Was it something I said? I am a relationally challenged idiot. So stay away from me. I mean, marry me.
Thanks, Kara. And anybody here honest enough to admit I'm a relationally challenged idiot? Okay, a few of you are honest. Thank you. Appreciate that. You're doing great. We're going to be talking about a relationally challenged idiot, okay? And But that's not his only problem. He's got a lot of other problems in his life, and it comes out in a number of ways. However, as we look at his life, and why don't you just pull slide 14 up for me? Slide 14, we're going to be talking about a guy who had a fatal flaw. What is a fatal flaw? Well, it's a kind of intentional mistake, and I say intentional because sometimes maybe it's not so intentional, but as you live your life, as you face various situations, you encounter different people, be it a girlfriend or a boyfriend or maybe just a friend or a teacher or a coach or a parent. Usually the people closest to you in your life help divulge to you areas of work, areas of weakness. And so usually we are made aware of what our fatal flaws are at some point in our life. And then, having been made aware of these through the various relationship encounters that we've had, what happens is we begin to make mistakes, and they're intentional mistakes at that point because we are aware of our flaws. And a flaw is a mistake, and it is fatal, meaning that it is very dangerous, so that a fatal flaw is a terrible and dangerous mistake most often intentionally made. You and I are flawed people. And thank God that we don't have to be perfect. It's a wonderful day when you realize that you can give up perfection and it's okay. But, having said that, what I would say to you this morning is, if your fatal flaw lies in a character area, it is dangerous, even deadly. Okay? So you're freed up to be imperfect. I'm freed up to be imperfect. But know this, that if you choose to be imperfect intentionally in a character area, telling the truth, how you handle people of the opposite sex, what you do with your money, your time, personal decisions that involve our character, these are fatal decisions. And I am convinced, as we begin to unpack the life of this final judge, the hero of the cycle, of the seventh cycle. In fact, what we're going to find in this story is it's not really even a cycle. In fact, the cycle has broken. And in every other cycle in the book of Judges, you see, and I've gone over this with you time after time after time, and that is that there is a period of oppression, and then there is a period of repentance and sorrow for living life the way they've lived it, and it's resulted in so much heartache and mess and relational stuff. And then they repent, they turn to God, God intervenes, He raises up a hero, albeit an imperfect hero. And that hero will affect a kind of deliverance, a kind of a new beginning for them. And then they're cycled into a period of peace and a measure of relative prosperity. In the seventh cycle, even the cycle itself breaks. And the people no longer cry out to God for a deliverance. They have cycled to a point now where in the Samson cycle, there is no one calling out. We're in the dark ages. We need deliverance from the oppression. We need a hero to rise up and deliver us from the oppressive Philistine rulers and culture. And the Philistines, a new people group now that we have to deal with. So the cycle breaks. And when the cycle breaks, there is no returning to God. There is a Everyone is doing what is right now in their own eyes, in their own viewpoint. And so what you have then is not just a cycle as it's worked in the past. You have a vigilante, a single man who is aspiring to be a hero. And as we unfold this thing and we begin to look at it, the details of it, you're going to see that this man who has this incredible nativity story, the only judge in the book of Judges who's given a nativity story. In other words, God raises up all the other judges, but He grows Samson up from the womb. He nurtures him. He puts him in a good home and a family with a good set of parents. He gives him good value training. He sets him apart from the earliest days of conception. And raises him up. And this guy could have been so exceptional. He could have, and in fact, when we read the fact that he is the only judge with the nativity story associated with his biography, you would expect that this guy is going to be the judge par excellence. He is going to be the best hero, the cycle that we've ever read in this period of time. In fact, what other heroes have nativity stories? Jesus. So when you have a nativity story where an angel of the Lord appears and he makes another appearing here in the book of Judges, when the cycle finally breaks, the angel of the Lord shows up. It's a pre-incarnate appearance of Jesus. He's not made flesh at this point as he is in the incarnation at Christmas. But he shows up and he tells a couple, a husband and wife who are currently childless and infertile and unable to have children at this point. The angel of the Lord shows up and he makes an announcement. You're going to have a child. You're going to raise this child according to very specific guidelines. And we're finally going to see a hero rise and deliver once and for all the people of Israel, right? And you would think this guy and this home environment would be everything that he would ever need. But you know what? He had a fatal flaw. And he failed to address it. And so we need strong homes in the dark ages. And many good heroes and sheroes could rise up in the dark ages if the home life is what it should be. But even when the home life is ideal, if we personally don't address those character flaws in our hearts and lives, it can destroy and maybe not totally destroy, but certainly shortcut the purposes that God has for your life and my life. In other words, you'll not shine as bright as you could have shined. You'll not be as effective as you could have been. Your life will be a little less than it might have been if you had addressed these, what we would call fatal flaws or character flaws in your life. Do you have a fatal flaw? Well, we all do. It's best to identify that and work through that. And I think the life of Samson is a case in point. And as we look at this guy, you're going to see he had everything going for him. He started so well, and yet he has such a poor finish. And I think that probably we all have seen people with so much potential, so much talent, so much God-given ability, and yet they never really go anywhere or do anything with it because they're hamstrung by the fatal flaw of life. And they get sidetracked and they lose their focus. And this fatal flaw is something they cannot get past. If that sounds familiar, or this is a familiar story, it's Samson's story. As we look at the story of Samson, on slide number 3, Samson, and what we're going to do here is in dramatic narrative in the Bible, it is best if you understand the fullness of the story before a lot of drawn-out application happens, okay? And so I may make some applicationary comments here as we work our way through the story, but the main goal here early on is to get the story presented, okay? So let's work through the story. Just as we work through, patiently enjoy it, look at it, let's define some things, okay? And then having laid out the story, I think what we'll do then is as we draw conclusions and applications here, we'll kind of save the bulk of those to the end, because I think what you'll find is they'll make more sense to you if, in fact, you know what the content of the story is. Too oftentimes, I think we talk about a story, we don't really know what the story says, and we try to understand it too early. So let's work our way through Judges 14:1. Slide number 3. Samson went down to Timnah and saw there a young Philistine woman. Okay? He went down. It's an interesting motif. As we look at this, if you look at slide number 16, what you're going to find, and by the way, I remembered to bring, through the help of a faithful friend, my laser pointer. Okay, let's see if it works. Where are we at here? You know what? It's not going to work if I got it pointed at me, right? There it is. We got to the red dot. Okay, there's the red dot, and it's somewhat of a red dot. It's not really working now. It's kind of off and on. There we go. Okay. Zorah is where Samson is from. Timnath, or the Timnah Valley, the Sorek Valley. Timnath is just nearby, probably 4 or 5 miles away or so. And if we go to slide number 3, what you're going to find is not only did Samson go down in geography, and Zorah is higher in elevation than Timnah, but he goes down in the story. His story is one of a downward spiral. And so when we read about people going down, it's a geographical commentary on the lay of the land, but is also a spiritual commentary on the trend of his life. His life was not this, it was this. And we see that he went down, okay, to Timnah. If we look at slide number 5, we see that he went down and talked with the woman. If we look at slide number 6, his father went down, okay. If we look at slide number 9, he went down to Ashkelon. Okay, so we see in Judges 14:1 through 20, we see not only something being addressed in elevation in terms of geography, it is a spiritual movement. That when he begins to move away from his dedication to God and he assimilates into a Philistine culture, he loses a sense of value and purpose, he starts downward and it never stops. The story continues in this trend. Okay? And so what we find is not only does Samson go down in the story, but the word saw. He saw there a young Philistine woman. And it's interesting because at the end of the story, this guy, this hero Samson, who had this ideal home life, this guy who sees a Philistine woman, he sees other Philistine women, he pretty much lives his life based on what he just sees, and if he likes it, he consumes it. He lives based on his sight, his vision, and ironically enough, at the end of the story, it's his eyesight that he loses. And he serves in a Philistine grain prison. Grain grinder in a Philistine prison. Listen, if you don't think a fatal flaw is fatal, Watch this story. See it. Feel it. Experience it. See what's going on here. Identify the fatal flaws in your own heart and your own life. So Samson is going down geographically. He's going down spiritually. He's looking at things. He's driven by his eyesight and the compulsions of his appetites. We see this early in the story, and we find that the Philistine culture was a very appealing culture and would have been to him. In fact, one of the reasons why the cycle breaks in the seventh cycle is because they were so comfortable with the Philistine rule. This culture had brought in women. It had brought in other things. It was the Iron Age. And so the Philistines had mechanical tools that the Israelites did not have. In fact, Samson had what I call Philistine envy. And these Philistines were beginning to make inroads into, they were pagans, but they were making inroads into the land of Israel. And this was influencing their culture. And like I said, there's no record of the people crying out. In other words, we kind of like these guys. We kind of like their culture. We're okay. I mean, the oppression is here, and yes, we've lost some rights. We've lost some of our freedoms, yes, but we kind of like it. What do we like? Well, we like their culture. We like their women. We like their devices. We like the metallurgy and the ironworks and the smelting of iron, and they can show us kind of how to shape some of these tools for ourselves. Samson had Philistine envy. And Philistines were advanced. They were attractive in a lot of ways. But they also represented a foreign oppression force. And they also represented, they had their own pagan gods. And even they were, these gods were things that would influence negatively the Israelite people and thus threaten their very existence. And so we get, just in verse 1, we get so much data in how the writer expresses himself and the beginning of the Samson story. And of course, Judges 13, we have the nativity story of Samson, and we're kind of skipping over that. But know that this extraordinary birth, he finally is raised now. He's feeling the attraction to other people of the opposite gender, which is perfectly normal. But it's not perfectly normal if you go around consuming Philistine women, especially when they represent an anti-God philosophy and stance on life. Slide number 3, again, verse 2. When he returned home again, he said to his father and mother, I have seen, emphasis on sight again, I have seen a Philistine woman. Now get her for me as my wife. Does that sound presumptuous? Does that sound a little bold? Dads, do you want your son coming home saying, Dad, I met this wonderful, attractive young female, and oh, by the way, we're getting married next weekend. Do you want your son to handle it that way? Doesn't that sound a little presumptuous? I think as a dad, what I would like is, hey, I've met this wonderful gal. What do you think? Thinking about maybe popping the question, what do you think? And how can we, I'd like to know your input and mom's input. You guys are important to me. Doesn't that sound a whole lot better? Then, oh, by the way, I saw a woman, go get her for me. Okay? Guys, take notice how to handle this, all right? Parentally arranged marriages are nowhere mandated in the Old Testament, strangely enough. But nevertheless, they tended to practice it. And the people of the time, there was a lot of honor and weight given to parents in this particular era, even in the Dark Ages. And the children, they did have input, as we see here, but Samson is adamant. I don't think he really cares what his parents think. He had to have her. His father and mother, verse 3, replied, isn't there an acceptable woman among your relatives, a Danite woman from among the tribe of Dan, which was Samson's tribe. Surely you can find a good Hebrew girl and not take this route, Samson. Surely among all of our people there's a woman that's a good fit for you. Must you go to the uncircumcised Philistines to get a wife? These uncultured and pagan people, oh yes, civilized, oh yes, represented many good technological advances of the times, but nevertheless their hearts were far from God. And in Israel, circumcision was a religious rite. It's a mark of God's covenant with them. And since marriage was with a non-Israelite was definitely and expressly forbidden by the Mosaic law, his parents objected to his marrying a Philistine woman. And they're like, Samson, you're set apart from God. We had the angel of the Lord, this incredible, mysterious being that showed up, that announced your birth. We've raised you right. We've done all the things we could have done. And this is the route you're going to go. Samson, you're set apart for God. These Philistines and the culture of the Philistines is anti-God. It's going in a different Yahweh direction other than Yahweh. It's more Dagon than Yahweh. Dagon was their God. But what does Samson say? Get her for me. She's the right one for me. She looks good. I don't care what she believes or the culture she's in. I want her. So we see he's driven by his appetites rather than good reason, good mind, good wisdom. Be careful there. The writer of Judges inserts a parenthetical statement in verse 4. Slide number 4. His parents did not know this was from the Lord, who was seeking an occasion to confront the Philistines. For at that time, they were ruling over Israel. Now, what is the this of verse 4? What is the this that is from the Lord? Is it lust? Well, I don't think it's the lust. Is it marriage with the Philistine? No, I don't think it's marriage with the Philistine that's from the Lord. It's not the disrespect Samson shows toward his parents. That's certainly not what the this is from the Lord that is about. The author tells us parenthetically, because he knows the end of the story, that God used all the wrong roads to get Samson to the right place. That God is so sovereign. He's so excellent at what He does in working with us in our human decisions. That even though this thing happens in a way that is so antithetical to all that is right and good and beautiful and heroic, that still God uses this story to awaken in Samson that which is heroic, that which is his calling and his mission, because the cycle had broken and people were no longer calling out to God, and Samson had lost his purpose and meaning, and I don't know that he ever even discovered it. It's like, I know I have a special birth. I know I've got, and he's going to realize a little bit that he's got this special power and strength, but he doesn't know how to go about using it for good because the people don't care. Philistines are okay. We're all right. Let's not rock the boat. Let's just kind of be quiet. Let things go on just as they have. And this was the atmosphere of the time. And so God uses all of this mess, all of this relational mess, all of this testosterone, all of this disrespect of parents. God uses it to begin to awaken in a young man his call. And here's how it unfolds. Verse 5, Samson went down to Timnah, together with his father and mother. As they approached the vineyards of Timnah, suddenly a young lion, this is not an old dude, this is a young, ripped, ready for battle lion, comes roaring toward him, not them, but him. Don't miss that in verse 5. Samson went down to Timnah with his mom and his dad, and as they, plural, approached the vineyards of Timnah, suddenly a young lion came roaring toward who? Him, not the parents. What's going on? Well, Samson had been separated from his parents for a bit. And why did he separate? Why did he take a different route, an alternative path away from his parents? And while on this alternative path was attacked by a lion, why did he even take the alternative path to begin with? How did it get singular from them to him? And as we look at Samson's story a little more closely, we see that there were vineyards of Timnah that they were approaching. And evidently, as they approached the vineyards of Timnah, the parents went on through the vineyards of Timnah and Samson skirts around. Why so? Well, we look at Judges 13. And we also go back to Numbers 6. And we realize that Samson was to be set apart via a Nazirite vow from the day of his birth. And when we look at the Nazirite vow, as it's presented in Numbers 6, what we see is it was a vow that people could commit to for an indefinite set period of time. It wasn't necessarily to be a lifetime vow as it was for Samson here, but it was a limited period of time when people would set apart their lives for the Lord to use. And then once the vow was fulfilled, then they could go on and resume a normal life. There were 3 marks of the Nazirite separation involved with the Nazirite vow. Listen quickly and closely. First of all, you abstain from wine. No partying. So from an early age, Samson did not party and drink wine and get inebriated and out of control. He was set apart at an early age. So there was no drunkenness. There was no carousing, no luxury. He just lived a very simple life. The second mark of a Nazirite vow of separation was not touching dead bodies, human or animal. Thus, no uncleanness associated with the process of touching a dead animal, no exclusion from worship, because if you came in contact with a dead person or body or an animal, then you had certain stipulations. I will not get into those this morning, but you had to go through a quite extensive, rigorous procedure for going from unclean to clean again. And so, a Nazirite vow participant would abstain from wine for a period of time. They would not touch dead bodies in human or animal, and thus they would not be excluded from the place of worship in the tabernacle or other places that would not have allowed them to be in places of fellowship with God. And then the final mark of a Nazirite vow was you did not cut your hair. And thus people would see you with your long hair, and they would think, uh-oh, a Nazirite. A person under a Nazirite vow. Let's not offer them wine. Let's not put him in a position where he's got to care for a dead body in his family. He's set apart for God. The long hair indicated as much. And think about this. Have you ever wanted to draw close to God? Have you ever wanted to abstain from the normal pleasures of life in order to have a better perspective on things? Have you ever wanted mental clarity and spiritual perception for a season in your life? And have you not set yourself apart, a period of self-denial, so that you could get that perception? The Nazirite vow, some people would do this from time to time. And if so, you would have considered in this time period, even though it's in the Dark Ages, you would have considered doing a Nazirite period of self-denial and separation, and the period of separation would fill its course. You would complete the course of actions, and after that, then you could drink wine, you could care for dead bodies, you could cut your hair like everybody else. But in this period of specific dedication to God, these were the things that you did. Now, in Samson's case, He was dedicated as a Nazirite from his conception, per the angel of the Lord, the pre-incarnate appearance of Christ's instructions to do so to his mother. And his parents knew that God had a special purpose for him. They weren't exactly sure how this would work. The people are complacent, are lethargic and apathetic. The cycle has even stopped. They're no longer calling out to God. How is God going to use this young man that he has given us in our family, that we know he has a special purpose for? That was the question. All the other kids could get haircuts, not Samson. Wouldn't that be great? Some of you moms keep that first haircut. You keep the hair and you put it in an envelope. And years later, you look at that. Well, Samson never had a first haircut. His hair grew and it was braided, as we'll learn later in the story. And why? Because everybody would look and, man, God's got a special purpose for that kid. He's just this tall. God's got a special, long Nazarite. All through his life, that people could look at Samson and say, man, God's got a plan. You ever met somebody like that? You could just see the talent. It's like, oh, God, use him greatly in the kingdom. I see that sometimes at Stones Hill. Like, God, there's so much talent here in this person. Place your hand, your call on their life. Use them at an early age. They'll help us to shape them as they should be shaped. So when they approach, back to the text, verse 5. When they approach the vineyards of Timnah, you with me? They separate because Samson is a Nazirite. He will not get close to those vineyards. Parents will go through, but not Sammy. Sammy goes around. Because God has a plan for Sammy. Okay? And as he goes around the Philistine vineyard in Timnah, suddenly a young lion came roaring toward him. On the count of 3, everybody roar. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Nice. Got it. I loved it. On the count of 3, everybody just meow. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Meow. No, that's not going to work. This guy was young. The word used, he was a young 1-year-old lion. In other words, he had something to prove. Okay, Hebrew word, young lion, something to prove. Mane just growing out. He's ready to mark his territory, right? Young Sammy, dedicated to the Lord from the womb, walking through this variant path away and around the vineyard that would have possibly contaminated him from his dedication to God. This lion had no idea what he was walking into. He didn't have a clue. Verse 6, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him, so that he tore the young lion apart with his bare hands as he might have torn a young goat. And I don't want you to picture that too much. But just know that he manhandled this guy. I mean, it was a piece of cake, no sweat. Obviously, the guy's got talent. That's what I think of young lions. And it was really self-defense. But he told neither his father nor his mother what he had done. Whoa. Now, if you killed a lion, wouldn't you want to tell somebody? Huh? All you young boys pumping the iron. Right? Okay. You rip a lion in half with your bare hands. That'll probably be news in the cafeteria at school the next day. A little bit. Right? Take a picture of it, pose with it. Okay. His masculinity, amazingly enough, does not shine through. Why? Why does he not spread the word, man? The big victory here, the mighty hunter comes home with the prey, right? He does not tell his mother or father. Why? Did you catch it? He contacted something dead. Don't miss that. Ooh. He averts the vineyard to avoid one part of the vow, but he breaks it with another situation. Okay? He has touched something dead now. And I don't think Samson realized what he was capable of up to this point. I don't know that growing up he demonstrated these incredible feats of strength. I can't see Samson, woo, look at this baby and twirling on his hand. You know what I'm saying? He didn't do that as a kid. That'd be pretty awesome though. I mean, that thing probably would weigh, a couple ton maybe? I don't know. A ton? He didn't do that kind of stuff. He was set apart. And when the Spirit of the Lord came on him, in fact, Samson wasn't big. Otherwise, they wouldn't wonder what the secret of his strength was later in the story. He was a normal, average-looking guy. Just a normal dude. 5'10", 175, olive-skinned a little, black hair. Long black hair. Just a normal guy. The Spirit of the Lord came on him. Okay? I don't think he knew what he was capable of, but in that moment, in all these deep, messed up details even, God had a plan, and God raised something up within him that helped him to realize in this moment, my power in you is going to begin to work itself out. So he understands that this is starting to happen, but yet he understands also that he has just violated a very important vow that his mama and daddy have told him about from the time he was born. And Samson has produced this corpse. And again, there's a long list of ritual things that he would have to do to make up for this violation of his Nazirite vow. And instead of running and taking care of this in light of what happened, verse 6 tells us he went down and talked with the woman, and he liked her. I'll do this God stuff later. I'll do the God stuff later. I'll take care of this vow of uncleanliness later. There's a woman I got in front of me. There is a woman, and I like her. And he's nonchalant about what has just happened with the lion thing. And Samson had romance on his mind. He'll do God stuff later. Verse 7, slide 5. Then he went down and talked with the woman, and he liked her even more. Samson rejoins his parents, and while they're haggling over the marriage arrangements with the Philistine family, Samson talks to this Philistine woman from Timnah for the first time, and he likes her, but we're not told if she liked him. Sometimes silence is loud. We never hear from her side of the story. So it's fine. I'm glad you like me, but I'm not so sure. Never told. All that matters is I like you. You look good to me. I'm going for it. Sometime later, verse 8, when he went back to marry her. So some time has elapsed. He turned aside to look at the lion's carcass, and in it he saw a swarm of bees and some honey. Samson is on the way to the wedding with his parents. And what does he do? They get to the Timnah vineyard again. He skirts around. While he skirts around, he thinks, I know what happened the last time I took this route. I'm going to go check it out and see what's there still. And so his parents go through the vineyard. He goes around the vineyard, and he looks at his little exploit and relives it for a moment. And then he looks and notices that some time has elapsed and that there has been some decay, but that a swarm of bees had formed inside the carcass of this dried out, dehydrated carcass that's been picked over by the jackals and hyenas and other birds of vultures and things that would take care of the remains of dead animals. It has dehydrated now. The swarm of bees have found a home within the carcass of this thing, and now they've made honey inside the carcass. Verse 9, Samson scooped out the honey with his hands, and he ate as he went along. And when he rejoined his parents finally, he gave them some, and they too ate it, but he did not tell them that he had taken the honey from the lion's carcass. What's being said here? What's being said here besides the obvious fact that we all like sweets? One of you gave a recipe to my wife at Christmas one year, and it was this popcorn covered with honey and peanut butter. And it has become my fatal flaw. I request this stuff. In fact, I request this stuff so much, my wife rolls her eyes when I ask for it. Because here we go again. Joey's wanting his honey-covered, peanut butter-covered popcorn. It's good stuff, right? It tastes great. I'm not sure if the bees tried to sting him or not, but Samson scoops it out. He's hungry for this sweet stuff, and we all like the sweet stuff. But what we see here, more than just a craving for something good, what we see in the passage is that the Nazirite stipulation has now been clearly broken. The first time he was in self-defense and he slays the lion and creates a dead body, it was in self-defense. Now, this time around, he willingly plunges his hand down inside the carcass, and this dehydrated carcass that contained the honey, he thus came in contact of his own willful volitional intent. This is not self-defense now. It's an appetite that wants to be satiated. It's an appetite that he's going to live his life by. I live for what I see. I live for what feels good in the belly, what feels good to the body. I live for that. I don't care about this God stuff. You with me? The first time it's self-defense. The second time, I don't care if it is a dead body. And he gives some to his parents, and thus, it's a double whammy. He puts them in an unclean situation. And notice that he eats it while he's walking along. Okay? God's got a plan. God's got a purpose. God's had him set apart from the womb. And now he's comfortable with it. Yeah, this is good. He's just nonchalantly walking along. I'll do that God stuff later. And I get the feeling as I work my way through this narrative that Samson doesn't care all that much about God and God stuff. It's no big deal. In fact, when we look at how honey is used in the rest of the Bible, especially in the wisdom literature of Song of Solomon, Proverbs, we see that eating honey symbolized sexual pleasure. Yes, it does. And when Samson finds honey in the lion's carcass on the eve of his wedding, he sees this honey in the lion. Not only does it taste good and in the mouth and feel good in the belly, but it's an omen, perhaps, sexual pleasure awaits me, and in a day where it's a pre-Viagra age, he considers honey an aphrodisiac of sorts. This will invigorate me for the wedding chamber. And if Solomon's symbol is applicable here, Samson had one thing on his mind, and I tell you, it was not a Nazirite vow. Slide number 6. Let's hurry. Slide number 6. Now his father went down to see the woman. It's odd because normally the groom would hold the wedding, but in this case, they're making concessions because Samson wants this girl really bad. They go into Philistine territory to do it. And there Samson held a feast as was customary for young men. Or we could say that these young warriors, based on how the term is used in other places, these were young Philistine warriors that came to this 7-day wine-drenched drinking bout at the home of the bride's parents. I mean, it was an all-out 7-day, hard as you could go bash, and wine flowed freely. The men were young. And what does Samson do? We have every reason to believe that he imbibed. Wait a second, I thought he was a Nazirite. So now he's touching dead bodies in self-defense. Now he's taking honey out of dead bodies because he wants to satisfy a craving. And now he parties. So he's got 2 of the 3 Nazirite stipulations broken before we ever hit chapter 15. 2 strikes. And the third one comes next week. I'll take care of this God stuff later. There's a woman I want. You ever been there? Verse 11, when the people saw him, they chose 30 men to be his companions. The Philistines didn't trust him, and so they give him 30 guys that will be with him to help him, supposedly. They're actually watching him because they don't trust him, and they don't trust what's happening here. Verse 12, let me tell you a riddle, Samson said to them. And this was normal in their culture to share riddles. So here he is, he's drinking. He doesn't care about this God stuff. He's in the middle of the enemy camp, and he wants to tell riddles. This is funny. I want to have a good laugh here with the enemy. If you can give me the answer within 7 days of the feast, I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. I mean, here's a guy that's supposed to deliver Israelites from these guys, these Philistines, but he's marrying a Philistine now, and he's telling jokes, slapping their back, shaking their hands, drinking, laughing, violating his vows of dedication. He's the life of the party. He's telling jokes. Why? I'll do this God stuff later. And why clothing? Why can't he say, like, I'll give you 30 quarts of honey if you can tell me this riddle? You know, if you give me the answer within the 7 days, I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. What about 30 loads of wheat or something? Why clothing? Well, fancy clothes were items that connoted wealth and status in the ancient world. And this may be Samson's way of saying, you guys are underdressed for the occasion. Let me get you some fitting attire. But there's another part of the wager. Verse 13. If you can't tell me the answer, you must give me 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. You've got to give me 30 outfits. And that would have been a pretty nice wardrobe in these times. Well, they listened and they thought it over and they decided, let's do this. Tell us your riddle, they said. Let's hear it. Lay it on us. They agreed to the wager. Verse 14, slide 7. He replied, out of the eater something to eat, out of the strong something sweet. Tell me what that means. For 3 days, they could not give the answer. And of course they couldn't solve it. They weren't there when all this transpired with the lion. Verse 15, on the 4th day, the groom and bride, you have to know, would have been separated for the 7 days. And on the 7th day, they come together. And there's a best man that would run messages back and forth. But Samson would have had a separation from the woman of Timnah for a 7-day period. And then the 7th day, all things would have been fulfilled. The marriage would have been completed. And then they would have consummated the marriage physically. So this is a 7-day drinking party and feast, riddle telling, having a good time. And they said to Samson's wife-to-be, coax, verse 15, coax your husband. Whatever means necessary, you've got to use. Let's break protocol. We're desperate. We want to win in this riddle game he's playing. So coax him into explaining the riddle for us, or we will burn you and your husband's household to death. Now, how would you like to be under this oppressed people? If this is what they're going to do to their own, what must they do to the Israelites? We're going to burn you alive and your family if you don't get the answer. Did you invite us here to steal our property? Verse 15. Are you in on this too? So forget the 7-day wait. We're breaking protocol. You get to Samson, you get to him now, and you get an answer for us. Verse 16, then Samson's wife threw herself on him. Let's stop right there. Wives, if you want to make your husband's day, throw yourself onto him. Okay? I didn't get a rounding applause of amen there from the husbands. If you want to break your husband's day, do what the next word says. Sobbing. Okay? Samson's wife threw herself on him. It doesn't stop there. She's sobbing all the while. You hate me. You don't really love me. You've given my people a riddle, but you haven't told me the answer. She's employing all of her feminine wiles. I haven't even explained it to my mom and dad, he says, so why should I explain it to you? And you can tell right away where this marriage is going to go, where his loyalty lies. And that's another sermon. Verse 17, she cried the whole 7 days of the feast. In other words, it wasn't just day 4, but when they came to her, she was actually the whole 7 days. She wanted to know the answer, and he wasn't telling. Slide 8. So on the 7th day, he finally told her. Because she continued to press him, she in turn explained the riddle to her people. And I find it very ironic that he who could kill a lion was no match for the wiles of a Timnite Philistine woman. Verse 18, before sunset on the 7th day, the men of the town said to him, what is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion? Samson said to them, if you had not plowed with my heifer. What did he just say? If you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have solved my riddle. What is heifer? I looked it up. It's a young, unbroken cow, especially one that has not given birth to a calf. Heifers were not normally used for plowing. Samson's reference to his wife as a heifer is disparaging, to say the least. He's calling her a heifer. And guys, please don't do this. He was ridiculing her for her untamed and stubborn spirit. I mean, here he is, a man of appetites and extremes. There she is. She looks good. I gotta have her. Go get her for me. And now over here, she's a heifer? What gives? Right? Does that sound remotely familiar to any of you? And you know what plowing with the heifer was a euphemism of? It was a euphemism and a metaphor for sexual activity. So Samson is accusing his wife of sexual impropriety before they're even officially married. Wow. He's not necessarily a fact that she was sexually active during this time, but what he claims that she was by saying, you are doing something inappropriate with my wife. You have caused her to cheat on me and to tell the answer to the riddle. She is a heifer and a cow now in my eyes. And it got him ticked off. And verse 19 says, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him. He went down to Ashkelon. Slide number 9, he went down to Ashkelon. It's another Philistine coastal city, about 20 to 25 miles away. It was the fastest marathon ever run. He got there quickly. He struck down 30 of their men. He stripped of the Philistine men. He stripped them of everything, and the word used indicates that it could have very well been Philistine soldiers that were stripped of their armor, their spoils, their belt, their clothing. He takes these 30 garments of clothing, and he gave it to those who would explain the riddle. Verse 19, he burned with anger. He returned to his father's home. He doesn't consummate the marriage. And what we find in verse 20 is that Samson's wife was given to one of his companions, that is, his best man got the girl. who attended him at the feast. Hollywood doesn't make movies any more sensational than we find in the Bible. The best man gets the girl. So the picture that the author paints as we hasten this morning to understanding exactly what's being taught to us here in this story, the picture that the author paints of this man is not good. He had this incredible beginning. He had an incredible start in life. And what we find is that he's disrespectful of his parents, though. He's callous toward his Nazirite calling. He could do this God stuff later. He's without any loyalty to his own people. He compromises in his ethics. He's rude to his wife. He's flippant with his tongue. He's driven by lust, eroticism, and appetite. He fraternizes with the enemy, but he also seeks to live among them instead of deliver his people from them. And yet, a sovereign God uses all these details to awaken him to his calling. Only God can do that. You know what? Samson never got the woman he wanted. He never became the man that God planned. And God uses failed romance to wake him up to the reality. God will do that sometimes in your life. He'll use failed marriages, failed romances, failed broken relationships to wake you up to a reality beyond yourself. In fact, left to themselves, the Israelites would have done nothing to deliver themselves from this cycle of bondage because after all, they had quit crying out to God. And so this unfortunate series of events, even through the disobedience of a tragic hero, we see God at work. Now I want to look at 3 applications as we close. You understand the story. You understand the details of the story. You understand the issues in the story. How does it work? What can you walk out of here with today as a personal applicational challenge? Well, as I was thinking about this, I saw 3 huge areas that need addressed. If you'll look at slide number 13, you're going to see Samson's fatal flaw. You need to look at something I'm calling my or your fatal flaw, my fatal flaw. And you need to look and think about a leader's fatal flaw. Okay? I talked to you about a fatal flaw and how it works. But when we look at Samson's fatal flaw, we see he was a he-man with a she weakness, dominated by his sensuality. And he gives us a picture of how to lessen our heroic contribution to the world if we don't identify and confront and deal with the fatal flaws of our heart, of our character, and of our life. We become so much less than we could have been. This guy Samson, this guy who was raised in a great home, who made these horrible choices. He decided he was going to drink and party. He decided he was going to sleep around with multiple women. And we see this later in the story. He objectifies women. He abuses men. He creates bloody battles. He disrespects his parents. He takes revenge. He makes these jokes among the enemy. He cares for nothing except his appetites. He loses himself in riddles and entertainment. And that's what's going on in the dark ages. We give ourselves to these lesser realities. And we live for personal revenge rather than see the bigger picture of what God is trying to do in a family, in a community, in a world. He was motivated by pride and a passion for revenge, this guy Samson. And I'm going to say to you that the dark ages will offer you a lot of honey in the carcass. It tastes so sweet, but it reeks with death. Revenge is so sweet. Extramarital affairs are so sweet. Gossip is so delectably sweet. Taking a shortcut is so sweet. One-night stands are so sweet. Telling people that gay marriage is okay is so culturally sweet. Blaming other people is so sweet. Manipulating your parents is so sweet. Manipulating your nation is so sweet. Indulging your appetites is so sweet. Having a bad attitude and offering sarcastic remarks is so delectable. May I ask you a question? What if in doing so, you are forfeiting the truly great cause that you could have championed? What if you are moving further away from all this God stuff when you go for the honey and the carcass? You've all seen a spider web. Sometimes they build these webs in your home, in your three seasons room, or out underneath your deck. They're kind of cool. Maybe as a kid maybe you snatch up a fly and throw him in the middle of the web. You ever do that as a kid? Some of you did. Well, all the boys did, all the girls didn't. Okay, let's just say it that way. That gets everybody off the hook, right? That's Samson. What do I mean? Well, when you take that fly and you throw it, he can land around the edges of that web. When you get that fly and he gets in the middle of that web, this intricate web that's sticky, there is no escape. And within a few short seconds, that fly's life is over. You know, the spider web for Samson was the women of Philistia. He dances around that web all day long. Guys, gals, if you don't identify the fatal flaw of your life, and you're going to dance around it, the day will come. You'll make a mistake. You'll land in the middle of that thing, and it will eat your lunch. Talk about relationships that are messed up. Come talk to me. It's horrible. You think you're good enough to dance around it. I'll dance. I'll land here. I'll land there. I'll land here. I'll dance around. I'll fly around. I'll look it over. Up, back, underneath, around. Left and right. I can handle it. I'm okay. I got this covered. Bam. Done. Guys and gals, listen to me now. Philistine women were his web. And he tiptoed on the edge of this thing, and come next week, and I'll tell you the end of the story. Okay, that's Samson's fatal flaw. Philistine women. He identified that. Secondly, what about your fatal flaw? We have to get radical in an area of a fatal flaw. Otherwise, it will consume our lives. And everyone may not have to avoid what we avoid, but for me personally, I can't do this because I know what my flaw is. And I want to tell you, potential heroes and sheroes, that the fullness of your life, the fullness of your heroic contribution is at stake here. Don't take the shortcut. Don't abandon, don't sacrifice the ultimate on the altar of the immediate. God's got a job for you to do. He's got a light for you to shine. And don't dim it now by getting caught up in the webbing. What is your fatal flaw, friends? Some of you can drink responsibly and not cross the line from a drink to drunkenness. And the Bible does not smile on drunkenness. It does not prohibit drinking, but it does prohibit drunkenness. But some of you can't take a first drink. It's your fatal flaw. If you take one drink, you're done. So don't take the first drink. Now, some people can, and that's their life. But it's not yours. Some of you can travel anonymously in a city and get a hotel room and do your conference, your 3-day conference, and not get into any trouble. But some of you had better travel with a spouse. Some of you can go to a buffet. Some of you can go to Golden Corral, man, and hit that hard. And you're all good because you come home and run it off, right? Some of you go to Golden Corral. Hey, it's just too much. I mean, the scalloped potatoes and the green beans and all the different meats. And it's like, you do that once a week. It's not going to be good. Okay? Nothing wrong with Golden Corral. And if you work there, that's great. But some of you can't handle the buffet. You better go piecemeal. Just buy you one item from this and go. Right? Because food is your Savior. It's your fatal flaw. Some of you can handle a little affirmation. Some of you are so thirsty for glory, it taints everything you do. You always want to be it. I'm not playing the subservient role. I want to be the one. And you could really go in and do a lot of good things with your life. But you always have to get the glory. It's not going to work. We've got to understand this. I want the credit for everything. And I'm not playing a subservient role to him or to her. You're never going to be heroic to the fullest unless you change your attitude there. Listen, guys, there's so much on the line in the dark ages. And maybe even the Nazirite vow isn't as outdated as maybe you're thinking this morning. What about living a simple life? You know the way you're inclined to go. And if you're going to be heroic, there are some things you've got to avoid, just like Samson and the Nazirite vow. Live in constant fellowship with God. Enjoy the Lord. Don't break the fellowship. Don't touch that which is unclean. Live a separated life. You don't just flow with the culture. You are heroic. You stand in the culture, even against it, even going against the grain of culture. Because no one else will believe these things and do these things. No one else will choose to be heroic in the dark ages. I'll ask you again, what drives you to the spider's web? Is it love of danger? Is it curiosity with the new and the novel? Do you get a thrill out of living on the edge? Do you assume that there's no situation that you cannot handle? Are you trusting your own strength? Do you think you can outwit the enemy and tell jokes even while you fraternize in the enemy camp? Do you think you're that good? Watch out. Slide 15. You are being drawn to the spider's web. And if you doubt God's word and you doubt what I'm telling you this morning, General Petraeus, Paula Broadwell, Lance Armstrong, Miss Teen Delaware will all tell you different. Will you please listen to that little preacher there at Stones Hill? Would you please just hear what he's trying to tell you this morning? Because if we can go back and do it over, our light's not going to shine as bright as it might have. Our awards are going to be disqualified. Our crowns revoked. Our pages in the history books rewritten. Because we couldn't handle a fatal flaw. Finally this morning, what about a leader's fatal flaw? Listen to me now. By all accounts, Samson could have become Israel's greatest leader, hero, judge. His fatal flaw undermined the value and the effectiveness of his leadership, though, because he couldn't handle an area of life and he refused to address it. He's a very good example of a very bad leader. And what we find in this story is that all the other judges could rally the men of Judah and the Benjamites and the Judites and the Danites and the other tribes of Israel. Ephraimites. They could rally the troops and they would up the mountain into the battle. But what we find in the story of Samson is not one guy follows the guy. Not one person says, "I'm with you, Samson." Not one person. Why? Because this fatal flaw clouded his life. They couldn't trust a guy who couldn't control his appetites. and they would not follow him. Would you follow a guy that could rip a lion apart with his bare hands? Well, I would tend to think so, but they didn't. Listen, guys, a leader is in trouble when they fail to address glaring character weaknesses. A leader is in trouble when they count on deception and riddles to safeguard themselves from truth. A leader is in trouble when they act impulsively and create problems by their inability to control their appetites or vision for life. A leader is in trouble when they're overcome by an area of weakness. He gave away his power slowly over time, you see. And our downward spiral starts with those little temptations we give into when no one is looking. It's a bad habit. It's a risky behavior. It's a wrong choice. It's a sinful vice. And we have to abandon it if we're going to survive the fatal flaw. A leader in trouble misuses their God-given gifts. He had a great home, a great family, a great nativity story. And he did not give his gift back to God. A leader is in trouble, finally, because they lose their teachability. Life spirals downward, out of control. I don't know where you're at. Don't know what issues you're facing in your life. But what I want to say this morning, I've already said. Do yourself a favor. Do Stone Hills Church a favor. Do your family a favor. Do your community a favor. Identify that area of weakness and go to whatever extreme you got to go to keep yourself from getting caught in the webbing of that. And thus you will be able to shine greatly in the days to come. Don't have to give up your crown because of things. Give up your titles or face these areas of disappointment because you took a shortcut in your character area of life. Lots of stories I could tell you to close, but perhaps I'll let you fill in the blank with your own story. Friends, a hero must rise. We need many so desperately. And I want to see you full force, able to use that ability without these other compromising areas that weigh you down, destroy what good God can do with your life. Stand with me if you would. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Nothing more beautiful than the Hebrew wedding. That's actually what this book is all about.
Yes.
There's a point during the wedding where the bride actually walks around the husband 7 times.
Yes. Yes.
That indicates that the wife is to be watching out for him.
Yes.
Men don't always see what, we just don't.
Yes. Yes.
We need our wives to do that.
Yes. Yes.
When the Yeshua comes back, he's coming back for a bride.
Yes.
He's not coming for a Philistine.
Yes. Amen. He is. And I just would say too, you think, well, I've raised a good home, a good family. My kids have all turned out okay. You think that? Don't be so sure. Fatal flaws await. Good husband-wife relationships. That helps raise heroes, right? Good parenting helps raise heroes. Living with expectancy of Yeshua's return, of Messiah Jesus' return. That helps prioritize our life right. So we'll be ready when he shows up, right? These are good. But what we're saying here this morning is that if you're a young person, old person, if you got a fatal flaw, address it. Circumvent it. Get around it somehow by God's grace and by utilizing opportunities for growth, plugging in, accountability, things of this nature. Thank you. Thank you. Let's pray together. Thank you, God, for this day. Thank you for this people. We ask and pray now that you would raise these heroes and sheroes to their feet. Instead of going down to Timnah, they will go up to the battle and be ready to fight and shine on the mountaintop. God, I just know there's some young people who are teetering on the edge of this. They're landing on the edges of the web. They're seriously considering dancing on this thing, thinking that they can do this and not be destroyed by it. God, let this word be a word of revelation this morning, that they will make definite decisions to walk away. And to thus, in a few years, shine brighter and brighter because they had the gumption and courage to do it. God, give them strength. And I pray for some of the adults here who have succumbed to a fatal flaw. This has been a thorn under their saddle for a long time. God, help us to get real with this stuff. Help us to own this stuff. And whatever we do, salvage our leadership and salvage our lives themselves by helping us to conform to doing what we need to do here this morning as you've shown us in your word, in your name.